Welcome to Why the Long Face? Two old friends lifting the lid on mental health over a beer with author and psychiatrist Paul Keedwell and business consultant and so-called comedian Ollie Turnbull.
So what's the first subject we're going to tackle tonight?
Well, there's a lot in the news and a lot of chatter about us living in a narcissistic time in history at the moment.
I got it.
I think with a sort of an emphasis on our leaders.
Well, we don't get political on this podcast.
No, we don't.
But we
get descriptive though.
But yeah, that's right.
And the president of America is orange.
The president is orange.
No, but it has been plenty of chatter about, Trump being a narcissist for a narcissistic generation.
Well, I wonder if left wing or right wing, we make no real comment on that. But I do feel that people think, and they've got some justification, is that personality politicians are kind of in it for themselves, a bit of vanity, to look good, to have an experiment, as opposed to an old-style politician, and this might be looking through rose-coloured spectacles, where there was an element of serving the people about them, a dignity about them, left-wing or right-wing. They were more statesman-like, and they did it for the people rather than themselves.
But in any case, I think we'll probably come back to Trump, because I think he's a fantastic character study.
Right.
But you're leading this, but I think that narcissism is fascinating because of its inherent contradiction.
So can we go back to basics, please, and can we just have something of a professional, i.e., definition of narcissism? Is it just all about thinking you're great, or having a predisposition to thinking about yourself a lot?
Well, I think we should, over the course of this ep, talk about narcissism in general, but also we're leading towards something more relevant, I guess, to psychiatry, which is narcissistic personality disorder, and how you spot someone with it. How you spot a Trump in your own living room.
And let's just go back. When you say personality disorder, do you mean as opposed to one of the other major types of malady, which is mood disorder or schizoid disorder?
Yeah.
This is a different class of disorder.
Yeah.
Personality disorder. And one of them is narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Got it.
It's important, I think, to say we've all got narcissistic sides to us, right?
Oh, God, yeah.
Oh, God, yeah.
I think so, about me. I was going to ask you a question about the developmental thing. One of the questions I was going to ask, right, is it like when you're trying to deal with a 2-year-old, and the 2-year-old has not yet developed this idea of the other person's point of view, the other person's desire?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean when you say it's a developmental stage? Because when a kid suddenly says, "Oh, I think Mummy would like this," you realise that they've discovered that there are other people thinking independently from them. Yeah, and it's almost as if with a narcissistic person, that's they haven't actually got that realization, or it's underdeveloped in them.
Yeah. By the age of 3, most kids have developed the idea of individuation. So there is someone separate from them,
right?
But it's in a very, very rudimentary stage. So between the ages of 3 and 6, kids are still very much seeking praise for milestones, like their first drawing, their first tying of a shoelace, and that kind of thing.
Right.
And it's all about showing off and seeking approval. And so it's like a sort of narcissistic stage. But then I think beyond 6, children are expected to take into account other people's feelings, and they do.
Yeah.
In a natural course of development.
Well, often 7 is referred to as the age of reason, isn't it? And it's when children have developed that sense of responsibility and that sense of I can't get everything my own way, or I can bargain for things by being good, therefore I get rewarded, etc.
Yeah.
Okay. So
and then adolescence is the next phase.
That's when I know you've got feelings, Mum and Dad, but I don't care.
Yeah, I'm just overtly insensitive to the fact that you want me back by midnight.
And there is that sort of, you don't know what I'm going through. You don't know what it's like.
So I think, I think you were probably quite a considerate adolescent, actually. So you can't say across the board everyone's...
Well, I was a bit depressed.
Right.
But I was a well-behaved teenager, but I was a bit introspective and anxious.
Ah.
Yeah.
Oh.
I've got over it.
Yeah. Well, have you got over it by just using narcissistic techniques to.
Yeah, that's right.
Hence the podcast.
Well, I've got over it by realizing that I'm great, and the world needs to hear my voice. And if I have to spend time with you in order for my voice to be
there is
heard,
nothing. That's brilliant. Nothing narcissistic about that.
no, I will reluctantly join you because you're seen as an expert.
Hey, but look, we all want validation. I think in life,
Yeah.
It's just that some of us crave it more than others to fill a fundamental kind of lack of security.
When does something stray from being a narcissistic tendency, into
Unfair.
into it, of course, into it being?
I've got a modest mic stand.
That's true. I think that one data point, the microphone stand, does not a diagnosis make. So when do you fall over
exemplar.
into a diagnosis of NPD from someone who's just a bit sort of self-absorbed? Is it like we define other maladies where it starts to interfere with their daily life or the daily life of those around them?
It causes either the sufferer, well, the person with the NPD, or others to suffer. I think is a classic one.
That's
it's
quite
a classic
nice.
definition.
That's quite tight. Yeah, I like that.
It's not like when you're talking about depression, say, where you say, well, part of the definition of the disorder is it's really restricting your functioning, because a lot of people with NPD would overtly function quite well, but you could say that it affects functioning in certain important interpersonal domains. It affects their relationships.
Because that's exactly the next question. It wasn't about relationships, it was about suffering. So a lot of people would say, oh, God, that guy, look at him, he loves himself, he's such a narcissist. But do and you might question, and I'm sure the answer is yes, they do, but you might question whether NPD patients really suffer, even though to the outside world they present a grandiose and hyper-confident shop window, if you like.
Well, there are two different types of narcissistic personality disorder, and they fall under thick-skinned narcissist and thin-skinned narcissist.
I read that.
And,
that's fascinating.
The thin-skinned narcissist suffers way more.
So I guess the thin-skin type, I remember reading thick-skin and thin-skin. I thought that was fascinating. Almost binary. It seems like there's not much of a spectrum. In that, I guess you can prick the bubble of a thin-skinned narcissist by proving that they are not the best.
And most of the article I wrote about managing narcissism seemed to be referring to the thin-skinned type.
Right, it did.
Yeah, because I think if you think about the causation of this disorder, it all comes down to a fundamental self-loathing, if you like. But the thick-skinned is within a kind of subset of psychopathy. So these people are impenetrable in a way.
Right.
So they have other characteristics that make them less able to suffer, or by the same token, less able to appreciate the suffering of others.
So they sort of start to get towards the psychopath, sociopath territory.
And I think what is more interesting and more Trump-like is the thin-skinned.
He does wobble a lot, doesn't he, when poked?
Oh, he's because the thin-skinned are, of course, characteristically sensitive to criticism for understandable reasons. So, should we define? I mean, we all kind of have a feeling of what narcissistic
if you've got a definition
people are
there and at your fingertips.
Well, people always expect a DSM-5 definition.
We love our DSM-5. For new listeners, I love a DSM-5 because it's a nice categorization system even.
Yeah. I mean, we all get, in the UK, we get taught the ICD-10, but the DSM-5 has a massive overlap with it.
Why are you doing the American one? I mean, we are all children of the world. But what's wrong with our good old British characterization?
Just because we're a global podcast.
Nice comeback.
Maybe I prefer their classification of personality disorder.
Do you, though?
Yeah, I think they're generally better at mood disorders as well.
In terms of classification? Wow, interesting.
But there's a big overlap.
Spit it out then.
Anyway, ICD-10, bearing in mind ICD-10 will be pretty broadly similar. So we've got 9 characteristics here, but a lot of them overlap, as you'll see. Number 1, grandiosity with expectations of superior treatment by others.
Right, Trump.
Fixated on fantasies of power, success, intelligence, attractiveness, etc.
In relation to themselves or generally?
in relation to themselves.
Got it.
And fantasies being key, because often a lot of these qualities don't match up to the reality.
Yeah.
Self-perception of being unique, superior, and associated with high-status people and institutions.
Wow. Yeah.
Needing constant admiration from others.
Well done. Well read out, by the way.
Thanks, man.
Okay.
You thought it was better than in the rehearsal?
It's better than I could have done it, and better than 99% of the world could have done it.
Love it.
Okay.
Thank you, man.
How do you feel after that comment?
So much more secure.
Keep
myself.
going.
Sense of entitlement to special treatment and to obedience from others.
Okay.
Exploitative of others to achieve personal gain.
Yeah.
Unwilling to empathise with others' feelings, wishes, or needs.
Yeah.
Intensely jealous of others and the belief that others are equally jealous of them. And pompous and arrogant demeanour. Now, I have a bit of a problem with points 6 and 7, exploitative of others and unwilling to empathise, because I think that's where you start overlapping with psychopathy. But I would definitely say that in the Keedwell definition, the more valid criteria are the sort of ones, steps 1 to 5. And probably the most telling this need for constant admiration.
A quick question. Those traits, when you read them through, I thought of white male privilege, funnily enough. Is it something that affects male...
Didn't see that coming.
Well, yeah, that's what I thought. I just thought of...
I thought this was a non-political podcast.
Well, it's not really political. It's more a question. It more raises a question. A, why have I got a bias? And B, does it affect men more than women? A lot of these characteristics are classic negative male stereotypes, and I'm wondering if that is borne out in the
the
data.
Stats do bear that out.
Do they?
It's
Interesting.
more of a male condition.
Is it really? Yeah.
Yeah, and rather alarmingly high.
Really? Have you got the data?
About 7 to 8% of men.
As opposed to in women?
About 4 to 5%.
So double. Wow.
Yeah.
That is amazing. But it's funny, isn't it? That some of those qualities we have negative gender associations and positive gender associations. But some of the things that you read out there, you can picture a frankly a man possessing, and women as well. But it sometimes doesn't surprise me that there are a lot more men than women who suffer from, if that's the right expression, NPD.
Yeah.
Don't appear sexist, but maybe.
Well, no, it's not about that. It's just about what the stats show, and it's just. It may prove over time to be erroneous, and it may be that women will catch up. I don't know. It depends on. It probably very much depends on the culture and who's in power.
Do you? Is it something that needs to be treated? And does it? Another question associated with that is: does it stand alone? Do you have someone who comes to see you and they are NPD, and you go, "I diagnose you as NPD"?
Right. So the question,
and what's the treatment?
No, the question is not necessarily do they need to be treated, but do they want to be treated? Most of the time, people with narcissistic personality disorder do not want to admit they've got a problem at all.
Yeah, that's
which is part of their condition.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that would admit that they've got some weakness.
And actually, they haven't. They're perfect. Yeah.
Well, look, I think to properly understand that, you have to understand, I think, what brings about NPD, right?
Is that, you mean environmental factors, or do you mean?
Yeah, right. No, it's absolutely down to absolutely. I don't think anyone's arguing that it's an inherited condition. Maybe elements of psychopathy in thick skin, but I think the core defining feature of narcissism has got to have its origins in childhood. That's
really interesting that you think it's so dominant. Well, go on then. What are the environmental features, old fella?
Right. Well, and like the classic non-attuned parenting style, in which the child's true needs are not met. So,
what does non-attuned mean in this context?
Just not being attuned to your child's needs, to
right.
neglecting them, or caring for them, responding to their needs in an inconsistent way.
Yeah.
So sometimes tending to them when they're crying, and sometimes not. Or
I remember sitting on a train once, and there was a woman with her child, and she was overpraising the child. To the point where it was sickly and a bit nauseating. Right. And then the child knocked her juice over. And she went ballistic with this child. And I remember thinking, it's consistency that's more important than praising and scolding.
Right.
And I was actually quite shocked, almost upset for the child.
How she just did this, swiveled on us.
That's right, on a sixpence. And the child took it in her stride. This little girl who was doing a really nice drawing, actually, but had knocked her juice over. She took it in her stride as if this was normal behaviour. And one part of me went, oh, well, she's learnt to adapt. And another part of me thought, what damage is actually being done to that kid? Because she's not old. She was 5, 6.
Yeah.
Seemed particularly intelligent. And is it that kind of thing, what you mean by...
Well, any sort of environment which would cultivate low self-esteem, feelings of shame and inadequacy.
You feel sorry for the child of the narcissistic person, actually. You know, it's horrible.
Yeah, and then if you couple that with excessively high expectations for your child, you've got the perfect kind of combination, perfect recipe. And interestingly enough, possibly excessive admiring, praise or pampering combined with this sort of other things is also not good.
Is it? It is not more prevalent in only children, is it? Sorry, I've thrown this one at you as if you've done that kind of research, but you wonder if, because an only child will tend to have more of a focus and attention from the parents, whether that breeds an environmental condition where narcissism can grow and flourish.
Well, you can argue it both ways. If it's an only child, they're going to get more of your consistent attention, not going to be distracted by parenting other children. But you can also argue the way you've argued it there.
It's mostly based on environmental factors, and that the key environmental factor is parenting children at a young age. I find that actually quite surprising.
Really?
Yeah. I would have thought there were a lot more other factors which might influence it, and it makes me even more reflective as a parent.
But that is the lot of the parent, to always think you perhaps didn't do things right.
By the way, my kids have turned out great.
Most kids turn out great, actually. You just don't need to be good enough, but you need to just be caring and loving, really. And then I think there is zero chance of your child developing NPD.
So that is a very good message, actually, Doctor. Not just from a psychiatrist, from a may I say, a wise person. And I think you're right. I think we fret too much as parents, particularly if we're in the Western world. We've got a bit of time to worry about these things and be a bit self-absorbed about these things. Well, actually, the simple things are the important things. Make sure a child feels cared for and loved, and be consistent in your rewarding and your discipline if you need to.
In the Western world, we may have more leisure time as adults to contemplate these things, but we also have potentially more individualistic societies, and so I think there might be a tendency for us to breed more narcissistic kids.
Which is exactly my next question.
I have no idea about transcultural comparisons, to be honest, but my hunch is
I
that
agree
we're
with
breeding more narcissists in this country than perhaps they're breeding in the Rift Valley.
I would
always use that example.
The old Rift Valley, or indeed developing nations, or indeed less wealthy nations, because they have more pressing needs, such as the next meal, to worry about, as opposed to where I fit in the world to worry about, maybe.
And also maybe they have a less of a materialistic outlook, so family is more important than anything else. I mean, that was the impression I got when I visited Naples recently.
The other question I had, yes. So, and I think I know the answer to this, but the grandiosity that you spoke about, it sounded a little bit like the grandiosity that you imagine in deeply psychotic patients. In other words, I'm reincarnation of Jesus, or I am the prophet, or I am Buddha, or I am Napoleon, was the classic sort of 70s sitcom thing. Is that at the other end of narcissism, or is that just part of a schizoid complaint, which is completely separate?
Yeah, no, that wouldn't fit with. No, we would never call that. We call that grandiose delusion, or a sort of belief system that's been that is an extension of their mood state.
Right.
I mean, in the same way that you might have such feelings if you took a mood elevating drug.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Cocaine probably is the most narcissistic drug you can have.
Yeah, grandiose, and everyone listen to me. But it's also, isn't everything great? Isn't everything great? Isn't everything brilliant? Which is sort of almost like the other end of bipolar, I feel.
I don't mind people who are thinking everything's brilliant. That's fine.
If they bang on about it, though.
People are on ecstasy. It's a very different kind of mood elevation that seems to be more about reaching out to other people and embracing other people.
That equally tedious.
Whereas coke, well, you might think that. Depends if you like them or not.
No, you don't like ecstasy. Ecstasy's got no market in Yorkshire. Get your bloody hands off me. No, I don't feel it.
Very affectionate people in Yorkshire.
I don't bloody feel it. I don't.
Just because your dad wasn't a very affectionate
Oh, my poor dad.
No, he's lovely, your dad.
He was all right.
No, but very affectionate people in Yorkshire. But yeah, you're right. They can be a bit brusque. Brusque.
I don't feel it. No, I don't.
They
I
don't-
don't
they
care if
don't-
there's a
they
banging
don't-
tune coming
They
on.
don't.
Get your
They
fucking
don't
hands off me.
appreciate it if you come on all strong when you don't bloody know
You
you.
don't bloody know who you are or
Where
what
were
you're
you?
on. No.
Where
Who are
do
you?
Who were you?
Just
But
'cause
once you're in, you're in.
Oh, aye, for life. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't care if you got a fluorescent tube on you. I don't know you. Anyway, I got another question, right?
Yeah.
Is two questions, sort of, but related. Narcissistic personality disorder, the sufferer, if we can call them that, will probably not feel that there's necessarily a problem. But is it normally...
No, because they're superior to everybody else.
Exactly.
Why would they have a
by the
problem?
very nature of the...
Why would they have a problem?
Yeah. But does it sometimes come with other psychiatric problems or emotional problems that do need attention and do cause suffering? Is it comorbid with anything generally?
So the thin skin narcissist who we're focusing on, they when their skin is pricked by any kind of I suppose puncturing of their ideal self, right?
They can crumble.
It can't crumble. Where we gone, Sigmund?
A little bit of Sigmund. Why not?
Is going to lead to what we call a narcissistic injury.
I read that, and I was going to question you on that.
So a narcissistic injury is any sort of life event which can lead to a certain degree of humiliation in the narcissist. So not getting that job promotion, or even losing a job, which actually is quite a common occurrence for someone with NPD.
Right.
Usually they're resigning in anger, because of course the consequence of having a distorted view of your self-importance is that most people don't attune to that.
Oh, no.
and it's going to lead to intense anger. How dare you not recognize my abilities? I'm leaving. The same.
I've heard people say, sorry to interrupt, but I've heard people say when people who tend to leave jobs often, should we put it, they didn't get me. They didn't understand what I brought.
It was all their fault.
Correct. That's what I've heard.
Because that's
their model of the universe.
Yeah. So that, or a lot, of course, relationships. Relationship histories is often terrible, unless, of course, the narcissist found someone who is a perfect match for them, who is the dependent personality, the person who is exists to admire others, to put their needs before theirs.
So if you have one of those types marrying a narcissistic type, you could say, "What's wrong with that? It's a marriage made."
I'm
in
not
heaven."
saying there's anything wrong with it.
No, but is it?
As long as no one's getting harmed. But I'd be probably in that scenario, the dependent person in that relationship is not going to be particularly happy eventually, and will leave. But it's not going to work with another narcissistic individual, it's not going to work with someone without a personality disorder, which is most of us, I would hope. So they're usually going to go at some point, well, sod off, I'm out of here. And that is going to lead to narcissistic injury.
Or in a thick-skinned person.
I can think of a very, very good example, actually, of someone in our friendship network, where a marriage where someone had an affair, and this led to massive narcissistic injury in the husband, who could never have conceived that anyone would do that to him. So the only time you're likely to see a narcissistic personality disorder coming into your clinic is when they've had a narcissistic injury, and that's going to lead to sometimes suicidal thoughts, suicidal behaviour. Even.
Wow, as bad as that?
Yeah, an extreme reaction, or excessive drug or alcohol use.
So then
coping.
Right. Is then sorry to interrupt again, but is that when NPD becomes a useful tool for understanding how they've got to this position, as it were, as opposed to diagnosing them and treating the NPD?
Well, I was going to say the other. Well, it can be difficult at first. I was going to say the other reason they might come to just maybe not a psychiatrist but a therapist is to complain about their partner, and how difficult their partner is.
Right. Oh, okay.
So it'll be all about why is it that I always get partners who never appreciate me or understand me?
So.
But
why are they coming there?
They're not able to understand the contribution they're making to the difficulties in the relationship.
But what's made them go to a therapist then?
Because they perceive there's a difficulty in the relationship, it's causing them anguish.
Right. Okay.
And they want to talk to someone about it. They may even drag the other half into therapy.
So this kind of goes back to my question about, do NPD patients really suffer? And we said yes. Obviously, the thin-skinned was, but even the thick-skinned, because what we're big on here is
the thick-skinned are gonna suffer as well, possibly, yeah, but probably not in such a conscious way. That's the point. So it's a different. They don't have access as much to the underlying low self-esteem that the thin-skinned do.
But they could. There's a potential for them to have a happier life. I mean, because that's what we talk a lot about on this podcast. It's all about easing of suffering and trying to understand why mental health issues can affect people. And even the grandiose, narcissistic, thick-skinned patient must be a pain in the arse sometimes.
Well,
we've still got to be sympathetic to the fact that they might be suffering as well, or being denied. But they're denied by the condition of a happier life.
Yeah, but they're much less likely to suffer the narcissistic injury, so they're much less likely to end up in healthcare settings.
Got it.
And much more likely to end up in forensic settings and in prison. So it's much harder to reach as well.
Got it. That makes sense. And again, suffering, but hard to treat. So,
you can imagine that if you didn't have any, if you also had psychopathic traits, you're not going to be, you're more likely to take your anger to other extremes.
Understood. As opposed to maybe a non-psychopathic who might think, I'm really unhappy. It's definitely not my fault, but I want someone to help me.
Yeah, but I'm not gonna, be violent or.
No, indeed.
I'm not going to destroy the object of my anger.
No, but I'm interested in finding out why I'm angry. So that might bring a narcissistic person to therapy, I suppose.
As I say, it's going to be at times of failure in relationships, failure in jobs, and those sorts of situations. That's when they're going to seek help. But they may not. But they often drop out of therapy fairly quickly because then the old
they know best.
Well, then the old defences just come back in. Yeah.
I was going to say you're.
So you've got a little window of opportunity.
Yeah.
And apparently I mean, I'm not a therapist, but therapists' opinions differ on whether you should be at that point, that window of opportunity, actually even suggest that there might be some narcissism going on, because probably they're not able to cope with it. Wait for them to get over the initial crisis and gather themselves before you start to say, well, perhaps there is a really varied but nevertheless powerful critical self-voice going on here that's fueling all this.
So I had a question.
It's making it more front and bright and pavilion.
Very good. I was wondering whether, as a therapist or a psychiatrist, you think NPD, definitely, stamp it on his forehead. But would you actually apply that label to a patient, or would they find that
not initially?
Insulting? No. They'd find that insulting, wouldn't they? I'm not narcissistic. I'm
very,
perfect.
Very difficult to accept.
Yeah, absolutely.
It would have to be done ideally over a number of sessions.
Over a pint. You can say, I've had a look at your records. I've listened to a lot of what you said. I've looked up a few things. Turns out you're a twat. It's a bit like that, isn't it?
Well,
you know what I mean?
I think in psychiatry in general, it doesn't help to put labels on people, actually. Sometimes
can it be
people are grateful for a diagnosis to help explain their problems.
Exactly.
But in the case of narcissistic personality disorder, and many personality disorders, in fact, it doesn't necessarily help.
No, because it's really, it almost could feel like insulting language. If you say, I think you've got generalized anxiety disorder, and that's why.
Well, no, how about this? I understand you've had a very negative life event, and we need to talk about that. But also, we need to talk about why it is that it hit you so hard.
Yeah, I get that.
And could it be that there are that maybe there is a tendency for you to be too hard on yourself, but you don't acknowledge that most of the time.
That's a very kind way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah, but that gives you somewhere to go without them sabotaging treatment straight away. Going, I don't need any bloody therapy off you. I don't have a disorder.
Well, if they're completely grandiose, they'll know better than you, despite the fact that you've been a psychiatrist 30 years. They'll be going.
Well, funnily enough, because of their sense of entitlement, because of the condition, they'll be rejecting a lot of doctors and a lot of therapists.
Yeah. Yeah, not good enough.
I want to see the professor.
Right. Yeah. I want to see the king of psychiatry, please. Can you have a lord of psychiatry? I'll see him. Question.
Or inadequate feelings. You may not be inadequate.
Well, no, question, right? So, can narcissism develop as a result of massive success or massive celebrity? So
Two things aren't linked.
Really, because I remember Charlie Brooker talking about this and talking about how everybody in showbiz starts off as a nice guy. And when they get offered a cup of tea, they go, oh, thanks very much. And then they get offered a cup of tea the next day, oh, thanks very much. And eventually, if they're starry enough, it's like, where's my fucking tea? On day 20. He did this brilliant thing about... And you're saying not, which is really fascinating, because you'd have thought...
No, I think you might become more narcissistic in your behaviour, but I think it's not for it to be a personality disorder that you've acquired suddenly. I think it would need to be, as I say, need to meet the criteria of being consistent, enduring. I mean, you might well be a pain in the arse on set or in your trailer.
That's a particular setting at work, basically.
But a very different person with your family or your partner.
What a good answer!
Because I think probably the indication is probably how good you are at maintaining a relationship.
Right, and that would have been bad before you became famous, probably.
Yeah, there are going to be plenty of NPDs in the entertainment industry because it's that chicken and egg. So they're absolutely going to be attracted to that industry. What could be better for getting constant validation and admiration?
That's true.
Than being a film star.
Than podcasting. Yeah. No, you're right. Podcasting, not so much. Although, if I get a like on Facebook, I'm absolutely over the moon.
Having said that, if we get millions of downloads per week, I'm going to become a complete narcissist.
We're going to not ever talk to each other, except when we've got microphones in front of us. We're going to have people to whisk us away. And I want a screen between me and that fucking idiot.
We're going to have the most expensive podcast producer available in London.
Yeah, we're going to have... Yeah, we're going to have...
I'm not going to talk to any of the staff. Can we do my bit and off again?
That's right. I want Martin Scorsese. I want to produce our podcast, please. And I don't want to talk to that man. I refer to you as that man, like poor old Jeff Lynne from ELO refers to Bev Bevan as that drummer, or in a Birmingham accent. Yeah.
Was that? Oh,
sad, isn't it? That drummer.
Why did you?
I had quite a few of us in the band. There were 7 of us to begin with.
Oh, and that drummer.
Yeah, there was 2 violinists, 1 cello,
that's gonna
me,
cause
a bass player, keyboards, and that drummer.
Good job. Bev was a nicely balanced individual.
He wasn't narcissistic.
Didn't suffer a narcissistic injury as a result of that.
As a result of that, I think a narcissistic sort of slight tweak. But no, I think Bev's pretty sound.
So we got any other questions for me, Oliver?
No, we got it. We'll talk about the mental health of Bev Bevan out of ELO and Bev Bevan's ELO later. But I don't think I do. I think it's almost time to...
Sorry, I did just...
you just cracked open another Stella Artois. One of those big ones as well. Yeah, we didn't really talk about the Stella Artois tonight, which is a bit dull, isn't it? But it's
it wasn't worth mentioning, was it really?
I don't think it was. No, but people worry if we're not getting slightly toasted.
No, it's a lubricant, that's all. So what's the best way of treating MPD?
Well, I was going to ask that, but it almost sounded like there was no treatment, but you treated the results of MPD. But from what you're saying, maybe there is treatment for MPD. I did read somewhere, actually, that drugs, if they're ever on drugs, are somehow less effective than they are with other disorders, which implies that maybe some drugs are tried.
It's quite hard to get people with MPD to take medication. Say they do suffer from depression comorbidly. Fancy word for you've got 2 things going on.
No, I love comorbidly. You know that. We discussed this in Series 1.
That's quite a shame when people do have a genuine depressive illness that you can imagine would be a common corollary of MPD. Also alcohol dependence or drug dependence, all of which you may well dive in with other medications as well. And it's quite hard for, as I said before, if you believe that you're quite exceptional, how's that consistent with taking...
Yeah. To make you better. Well, you don't need to be made better because you are there already.
But transference, what I came up with as a unique sort of approach to MPD amongst the psychotherapy community is transference-focused therapy. And that all comes out of Freud's Going back to Freud again, and again, more evidence that some of his stuff was useful, which is the concept of the ideal self. And you remember I said one of the toxic conditions for developing NPD would be huge expectations for success in the parents. And these parents, if that's combined with them being quite neglectful of their emotional needs, what are they going to do? They're going to try and meet those other ideals, as well as having temper tantrums and trying to get attention in another way. They're constantly going to be trying to strive for perfection in academia if, say, their expectations are sort of high achievement in academia. It could be other things, but it's often academia. And those standards are often impossible, and that leads inevitably to a lot of harsh, unconscious self-criticism. Why haven't I become professor in 3 years?
And of course, in academia, it's kind of stark, isn't it, about how you achieve. It's not some subjective. It's a bit objective.
But even if objectively you become a professor, it's not going to stop you being suffering, actually, because narcissism is like a puncture in a tire that needs to keep being pumped up.
Harsh.
Until you find a way to seal that hole, you're going to keep wanting more. So you're going to get to professor, but then you think, well, what next?
And you probably
I'm not the best professor in the world.
And you might not get the adulation from your parents anyway.
The next is Nobel Prize, I guess.
Oh, no, not stupid physics Nobel Prize. I want peace.
Yeah, exactly. You got your physics Nobel Prize. Everyone, that's too easy.
Thanks. And you take it home to Dad. Dad, I've got it. Well, you wouldn't go, Dad, because you'd be old by then. But you go, Father, that's not like it. I think I've got a physics Nobel Prize.
All of this illustrates how much we should be showing.
Prize, is it?
All this demonstrates how we should be actually feeling compassion for people.
I do, definitely.
With no matter how severe it is. But I think we can all relate to a certain degree to this process of puffing ourselves up and bragging in front of other people sometimes to make ourselves feel better. What we wouldn't necessarily do, where PD patients do, is actively try and make the other person feel small in comparison, because that's actually projecting. That's actually what Freud meant by projection. Let's make the other person feel how actually, in reality, I feel, but I don't acknowledge it. I feel small, but I'm not acknowledging it. I'm going to make you feel small instead, and that's very important to me.
And that's what a narcissist would do.
That is what a narcissist would do.
Is the Peace Prize the best one? And is there a hierarchy? And do they all get together in the ante-room and go, and like the Peace Prize winners, like Nelson Mandela's like lauding it over stupid physics and chemistry? And is there a spelling one? How far do the Nobel Prizes go down? Do they go down to spelling, hopscotch?
It's pathetic, this, isn't it?
Tennis?
Everybody? It's pathetic.
There should be one for podcasting.
You are just... What kind of narcissist worries about which is the best Nobel Prize to get?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I suppose when you put it that way.
Which one do you want?
Me, just being nice. Being nice.
They should have given you one, shouldn't they, by now?
Yeah.
Transference focus. But
Knitting.
Freud said, going back to Freud, if I may, the ideal self is within the superego.
Right.
Remember, he had the superego, ego.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, and the ego is kind of where you are, and the ideal ego is where you want to be.
Hang on.
That's ridiculously
Is this the
inflated.
same thing as a superego?
It's a little portioned off bit of the superego.
It's
created by your parental expectations and the expectations of your peers,
right,
and all that sort of stuff.
And it's got nothing to do with finding genitals on eels.
Well, it probably all links in somewhere or another.
So hang on, this bit of the ego is part of the superego. It's really complicated, this model. I don't like it. It's just got bits sticking out here and there. It's not neat.
It's not that complicated.
We've got superego, ego, and id.
Well, you've got the
perfect ego.
How many synapses are in the brain, right? Billions.
Yeah, right.
So is it a bit silly to just go, well, it boils down to 3 blobs? I think it's okay to dissect them a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. It's quite hurtful to call me silly, though.
That's all. That was mine. I was narcissistically injured. And I was lashing out as a result.
I'm the victim.
So the transfer focus therapy is aimed at the active interpretation of the patient's aggression, envy, grandiosity, and defensiveness. So you keep bringing it back to that. Yeah. So why is it that you're often quite aggressive towards me?
Yeah. Well, you're yeah, no. You're really, really irritating. Oh, sorry. You give me that as an example. No, I understand. Yeah, no, quite.
And that was a very irritating thing to say, I must admit.
No, I get your example. So
But
good.
it was my little narcissism test.
Did I pass?
No.
Oh, sorry. That's good.
Well, yeah, you passed. You're a narcissist.
Oh,
Well, we knew that already.
great. Well, I'm perfect.
Well, I'm looking in a mirror, really, so,
I'm even good at being a narcissist.
We're both narcissists, ladies and gentlemen. But we're not NPD.
I don't think so. I think we're too kind at the end of it, and we catch ourselves up.
I don't think
obviously.
I don't think we're completely self-centered. Thank God.
No, I think there's something in there. Right? Is it time for a summary? Because I've learned quite a lot here.
I think so. Yeah. Get us out of this hole.
All right. Well,
This narcissism wormhole.
let me try and summarize, and then you jump in when I've got things wrong. So, narcissism is an inflated sense of self and one's own self-importance, and it manifests itself clinically as something called NPD, which is narcissist personality disorder, which is a personality disorder as opposed to a mood disorder or a schizoid disorder. Not necessarily treatable as such, but can be comorbid with things like depression, particularly in the thin-skinned type of NPD sufferer, who is likely to suffer from narcissistic injuries, which when their universe of their belief system, which shows them at the top of the human race, is pricked in some way, they come across someone who's manifestly better at boxing, or manifestly better at chess or arguing or whatever, and that can lead to one of the more familiar disorders such as depression, which of course can then be treated. It can be difficult to treat because they disappear off treatment very easily because they don't need it, because they're brilliant and they're better than you, as the doctor.
Yeah.
But I think...
Well, because there's always a better doctor they can go to.
Yeah, exactly, which they deserve, of course.
What I was... Obviously there isn't, because I am the best doctor. No. That's giving away my own narcissism.
Which is, of course,
and on
why
it goes.
I chose you as the best interviewer to be my partner. One thing I found was really interesting was that the absolute importance of the early development of the child in terms of them being susceptible in later life.
Absolutely.
And that made me, recap on my parenting and my childhood and think I'm okay, actually, on both shots. Certainly my childhood. My parents were very even-handed and loving. And I think that's pretty much all I learned.
I love that.
Towards males.
Beautiful, beautiful summary, Oliver.
Oh, thank you. I don't think I get much wrong because you didn't dive in.
I really, really need to strike your ego on that one, because that was perfect.
Well, of course it was.
All I'd add to that, I think, is that I suppose a hopeful note at the end here, which is that,
that's nice.
That people can move past this sort of trap of the narcissistic functioning, which is constantly trying to defend against their self-criticism by engaging in therapy, and that therapy can and often does achieve great results in reducing the amount of self-criticism and therefore the need for constant validation. Leading to more balanced relationships going forward, and happier friendships and intimate relationships and everything.
I like that. We should always try and end on a note of optimism like that. Nicely put, without sounding like a kiss-ass.
So thanks for listening to this app, everyone. We would love it if you could get onto the podcast app, whichever your podcast app is of choice, and give us a rating.
iTunes, Spotify, or the website.
Only a 5-star rating, obviously, because we're narcissists.
That's right. I mean, if you haven't got anything nice to say...
ytlf.com. Do give us feedback. As ever, there is loads more to say on any of the subjects that we select for an episode, right? But it's a starting point for thinking about it. And we hope we have made you think about narcissism and actually think about it in a kind of compassionate way.
Definitely.
All right, so see you next time.
Nice one. Bye.